The scripture lesson comes from the book of Genesis, reading chapter 22. Listen then for the voice of God. After these things, God tested Abraham. God said to him, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on the mountain that I will show you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place far away. Then Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, Father! And he said, Here I am, my son. He said, The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So the 2 of them walked on together. When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar, and there laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham! And he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, The Lord Will Provide, as it is said to this day, On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
How many of you have ever had or lived with a 2-year-old? Anybody ever lived with a 2-year-old? At some point, most of us have. What is a 2-year-old's favorite word?
No.
That's exactly right. 2-year-olds love the word no. It really doesn't matter what you're asking. Do you want to go to bed? No. Do you want ice cream? No. Do you want to go play? No. It really doesn't matter what you ask. No is the answer. Now, when a child turns 3, and some of them take a little longer than 3 to get there, some of them 3.5, 4, somewhere in that neighborhood. But after a while, their favorite word changes. So can you remember what the 3-year-old's favorite word is?
Why?
Why? There again, it does not matter what you're asking. It's time to go to bed.
Why?
It's time to eat lunch.
Why?
It's time to go to church.
Why?
Yes, you must take a math class.
Why?
Some people don't outgrow it for a little while. This story, this weird story from Genesis, is one of the why stories of the Bible. On the surface, it's a story to answer a fairly simple question. The first question that would be asked is, why do we call this place the Lord Provides? Now, we have to remember that we're fortunate enough we get the story written down. But the writing of those biblical stories, especially in Genesis, took a long time to get there. And the stories from Genesis began as stories around the campfire. Stories that were told orally. There was no written work at that point. And so a grandson might come to grandfather and say, "Grandfather, why do we call this place the Lord provides?" And the grandfather would say, "Oh, let me tell you a story about our father Abraham." And the family would gather and would listen to this story about Father Abraham. Now, as the child would get older, and maybe even into adulthood, the why wouldn't go away. It's just, the focus of why would change. Because after a while, if you were a good Hebrew child, you'd begin to look around and you'd say, okay, all of the people around us, all of these other different tribes and nations, they tend to sacrifice children. And so you would go to grandfather and say, "Grandfather, why do we not sacrifice children?" And grandfather would say, "Oh, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story about our father Abraham." And so the family would gather and this story would be told again. And at the end of the story, grandfather would turn to the grandchild and say, "That's why we do not sacrifice children, because God would not let Abraham sacrifice Isaac." Now, if you've ever been to Israel, the Israeli Tourist Department will be happy to provide you with a guide that you pay for. And depending on what kind of guide you have, they may take you to the center of the old city of Jerusalem. And if you're standing there in the old city, your guide will point out the Dome of the Rock. And your guide will point out the west wall of the old temple. And the guide might ask you, say, "Do you know why we worship here?" And if you're up on it, you say, "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I do know. Because at least since Constantine's mother, the Israelis and those who have lived in the Middle East have said, this is the mountain in Moriah that is talked about in Genesis. This is the mountain where Abraham bound Isaac and was prepared to offer him as a sacrifice. Here in Jerusalem. And this is the story that changes everything." And so this story continues to provide answer to why. Why do the central three faiths of the Bible, the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims, why do they consider Jerusalem to be so holy? Well, the first reason why is because this is where Abraham was supposed to have been prepared to offer Isaac. Those are questions that get asked, well, why do we do this? Why do we do that? And in biblical times, there was no science. There wasn't anything like that, so you told stories to explain why things were the way they were. But now the story's written down. Now the story's written down, and anybody can go anywhere and purchase a Bible, and if you can't afford a Bible, you talk to me and I will put one in your hands. Oh, and by the way, 3 weeks from today, we're going to be giving our third graders Bibles. So if you've got a third grader, you need to let us know so we make sure we have enough. And once the Bible then is written and is in our individual hands, then we can begin to talk about, oh, what does it mean for me? We can get really personal. And we can begin to dig in to these stories at a level that you can't really do around the campfire. And those of us who study the Bible and those of us who wrestle with this very weird story begin to ask another question. Why? The children had the exact right reaction. You're going to sacrifice your son? You and I have now read this story and heard this story so many times. We know the end of the story. We know how it's going to work out. Can you remember the first time you saw The Wizard of Oz? Now you and I can watch The Wizard of Oz because we know how it's going to end. But the first time we saw The Wizard of Oz, that witch was scary. I don't care who you are. And imagine hearing that story for the first time. Wait, God wants Abraham to do what? Now, it's very interesting because in this particular telling of the story, the mother, Sarah, is not in the story. And my guess would be that's on purpose. Because my guess is that Sarah knew what was going on in this story, there would have been a little more to the story. After these things, God said to Abraham, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and sacrifice him in a place I will show you. And Abraham does not say a word. My guess is, if there had been some marital communication going on at this point, Sarah might have had something to say. Guess what her question might have been?
Why?
Abraham doesn't ask why. He cuts the wood, sharpens the knife, gets the fire, loads the donkey, brings 2 servants, and 3 days later reaches the mountain where God has shown. Now, you and I know the end of this story, and so sometimes we forget what tension this must have been. This Isaac is the son that God has promised, and that God has promised it is this son who will bring about the covenant relationship. And it's interesting because after these verses, God speaks one more time in order to reiterate the covenant that he's made. But after that, at least according to the Bible, God and Abraham never speak again. And it's easy to imagine that after this little episode, the relationship between God and Abraham changed. And the reason it would have changed is the very reason of the 3-year-old question. Why? Why would you want to test Abraham? My husband has a theory. Kevin says that this is the first time that God has done a test where Abraham actually managed to pass the test. We've been dealing with Abraham and God since chapter 12. Chapter 12, God says to Abraham, pick up all your stuff and move. And Abraham does, and he moves to this promised land, and then there's a drought, and so he moves to Egypt. And God's going, no, that's not where I told you to move. And God says to Abraham, I will make your descendants like the grains of sand on a beach through your wife Sarah. And so not once, but twice, Abraham moves to a different spot and tries to sell off Sarah. And God's going, no, that's not how it's going to work. And finally, Sarah's brought in on this promise, and she gets to the point that she's tired of waiting as well. And so she brings her servant girl Hagar and gives her to Abraham as a wife, as the Bible cleans it up. And Hagar has a son. Oh, good. And God's going, no, that's not what I told you to do. And then Sarah gets mad and says, throw him out. And Abraham's going, what? And God says, just do it and I'll take care of the situation. And now God says, take your son, your only son. Oh, Ishmael? Nope. Isaac, whom you love. And sacrifice him in a place that I will show you. And this is the first time, at least according to my husband, this is the first time that Abraham does what he's supposed to without asking any questions, without messing it up. And that's a possibility. Except that it still doesn't answer my 3-year-old question. Why would you want to test Abraham? You and I have a hard time with this whole God testing business. We don't understand God's working like that. Sometimes Jesus would test his disciples, but it was only to ask a question. Once Jesus tested his disciples, and it's the very song that the children sang, hey, look at these 5,000 people, how are we going to feed them? And the disciples said, oh, no. And it was a test. But it a simple test. It was a word test. And when it comes to God's testing us, we are very uncomfortable with that notion of God. Why? Why would you test Abraham? Why would you even think of sacrificing a child? This is basically the first why story in the Bible. But there are a lot more of them when you read the rest of the Bible. The whole book of Job, all, 36, 42 chapters, how many chapters are in Job? All of them deal with the exact same question. Why? Why suffer? If you want to be more specific to Job, why do good people suffer? And then you begin to get into the prophets, and the prophets are trying to answer the same question, because the people are saying, why are we in captivity? And the prophets struggle to answer the question. And we move into the New Testament, and we've encountered Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he is basically asking, why do I have to do this? And then you get to the letters of Paul and James and Peter in the back end of the New Testament, and they have to answer the question, why are we being persecuted? The Bible struggles with that underlying question, why is this happening? And it starts with Abraham. On the surface, it's a simple why story. This is why we call Jerusalem the place that God will provide. This is why we don't sacrifice children. This is the time when finally Abraham got it right. But none of those answers are very comfortable in the underlying question, why would God want to test Abraham? And you see, we keep still asking the why question. Why am I the one who lost my job? Why can't I find another job? Why is it that I have the diagnosis of cancer? Why is it that my family member died? And all of us ask those questions, and at some point, there's usually some very well-meaning person in our lives who tries to answer the question. And the answers always come out bad. Well, it's God's will, or it's God's plan. At which point, I think we're finally justified in saying, well, this is a really bad plan. In the Abraham story, there is no answer to the question, why? If you read Job, there's no answer to the question, why? The prophets never adequately answer the question, why? Jesus, of course, didn't even expect an answer to the question, why? And Paul and Peter and James and all those who wrote the letters at the end of the New Testament, they don't have an adequate why either. But they all have an affirmation to make. Abraham's affirmation before he spots the ram. You remember Isaac turns to him and says, I see the wood and I see the fire. Where is the lamb for the sacrifice? And Abraham's faith says, God will provide. And when Isaac is rescued, and there's something there to sacrifice instead of his son, Abraham names the place. God will provide. And Job understands that in the giving and in the taking away, God will provide. And the prophets understood, even if we're in exile, even if the temple is destroyed, God will provide. And Jesus understood that even hanging from a cross, God will provide. I don't know that there are any answers to the question why. I would suggest that in the times of crisis we try to stop answering it. And instead, we witness to the faith that God will provide. When the house is burned down, or when the job is gone, we walk alongside our family and our friends with no answers to why, but with faith that God will provide, even if it's through us. And then when the cancer comes, and when the hip gets broken, and when there's bleeding into the brain, when there are hospital visits and doctor visits, we don't know why, but we will be with our family and friends, even as God is with them, to witness to our faith God will provide. And when death comes, we gather at the funeral to witness to our faith. We do not understand why this death has happened, but we are here with you, and God is here with you, and God will provide. This is a weird story. And I don't think it answers the question why. I do think it makes a witness that our God is the God who walks with us and the God who will provide. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.